I mean, in the sense, we're aiming to influence with our thought leadership pieces, but thought leadership pieces are much more long form. There's a lot more content to them.
My name's Peter Sumpton, and this is the Marketing Study Lab podcast. A podcast for those that are thinking, have thought and are doing, or already have a marketing qualification. But there's a little bit of something for everyone, as we cover a whole host of marketing topics. I chat to some amazing guests, each one a superstar in their own niche. And if you have a burning marketing question already, or after this episode, get in touch, we'll chat it through. peter@marketingstudylab.co.uk, or find me on LinkedIn, the link is in the show notes. If you'd like to leave a review on iTunes, this will really help others find this podcast and spread the marketing word. Now let's get on with today's episode. Ever been influenced by something? Or even someone? We'll be covering what an influencer is later, but first we're discussing all things content with the wonderful Janine Wood. Janine is a senior partner at Armadillo Consulting Group, providing communications and strategic management consultancy, where helping organisations capture their target audience's attention with tailored, impactful content is the name of the game. For over 25 years, Janine has worked in a variety of sectors, right through from new disruptive technology to packaging design, and loves creating strategic plans and writing the content within them. For somebody who loves the written word so much, there was only one question and one place to start our chat. Janine, which word is spell checker not helping you with?
Oh, well, actually, I thought about that and I thought, yes, there is a word, skewed, something that was skewed.
Okay.
And then I was asking my kids and various people, and we were going, well, queued, we were trying all different, and it didn't help me with it. But anyway, I've got it now, Skewed. It took a bit of brainstorming, but generally spell checker works fine. Really, it does. Yeah.
Nice one. I'm a terrible speller, so that gives me full confidence. And I expect to see skewed quite a lot now, to be honest, because it's a word you don't really hear very often. What's the story that's brought you to this stage of your career as senior partner at Armadillo Consulting Group?
Right, okay. Well, in the late 80s, I was working with a PR consultant who was working in the fashion and beauty. So it was consumer PR. So we were working on a number of really glamorous accounts like La Perla and Givenchy and Hermes, some lovely accounts. So I started working with her and really enjoyed it. And it was all about press releases and about typing them and then printing them out and then posting them. And it seems unbelievable now, of course, that it was incredibly time consuming. By the time you sent them out, then you'd have a couple of days before you could phone people up. So as you know, you're probably too young, but anyway, I can tell you that it was time consuming, but we knew no better than that. So that's very much how I started off. And then over a couple of years, I then went my separate way from that PR consultancy, and I started building up my own client base, still in fashion and sort of fashion and jewelry and health and beauty. And then along came a recession, and things kind of folded in on everybody, especially in the sector. And I found somebody got in touch with me, and they wanted some work doing for a B2B client. And that kind of opened a whole new avenue to me, because suddenly I wasn't talking about fashion and what trends and what colors, which ultimately was quite superficial. Mm-hmm. I was working on really stories that really added value for these organizations, and I loved it. So that was a complete turning point. By the early 90s, I was working on B2B. And that's what we've been doing ever since, really.
Did you just fall into the fashion? Do you miss it at all?
I fell into it because that was what this PR consultancy was working in. So that was where I cut my teeth, as it were. I do not miss it a single bit. So every now and then to do some consumer PR work, and I'm reminded that I don't know. It's horses for courses. For some people, it's great. It's quite fluffy, let's say, whereas B2B is much more serious. You can really talk about some serious topics, and I think it's much more interesting. I love writing. That's one of the key things. I love sort of sitting down and nutting out a strategy that's going to work for a client and say, right, what are the best stories? So you highlight the essence of what they're about, their unique points, and you write about that, or you cover that in topics that highlight really what they're doing. Whereas in fashion, it was much more about phoning up journalists and finding out if they could, use this red sweater, and purple was the trending color. So it's not really that bad, but it was much more about product placement, really, and getting the fashion items used for shoots than it was around writing a story.
Sure.
The stories were very small. They were much more press release. So no, in a nutshell, I don't miss fashion at all.
I think that brings us nicely on to just, if you can give us a quick synopsis and explain what Armadillo Consulting Group is all about.
Okay, so Armadillo Consulting Group there are 5 of us, so we're very small, and we all focus on B2B, a range of different sectors, from executive search all the way through to everything to do with digital ecosystem, very much into change management. And so everything that impacts businesses from branding and marketing perspectives, design, packaging design, all the way through to talent, people talent, change management, organizational change, and how the digital world is impacting on all of those, and all the changes that occur within that.
Well, it's quite a lot.
It is a lot, but in a way, although they're very different sectors, so I'll deal a lot with the finance sector, and I'll deal a lot with the business sectors, and ad and marketing. A lot of them dovetail as well. I mean, digital is the big thing, of course, that links everybody in the sense that everybody is being impacted in one way or the other, and how they respond to that, and how they make the most of that is fascinating now. So we really do live in a time when we've got some really interesting things to talk about, and change just keeps occurring. That's the whole thing. It's a constant now. So,
yeah, absolutely.
So there's new to talk about. Yeah.
I think one thing that I want to cover today with you is pretty much everything comms wise, because like you said, you've got quite an eclectic mix there, and you cover you've got a very good, well-rounded view of B2B marketing. So if we look at content first of all, surely it's just a case of creating any type of content, distributing it over as many platforms as you can, and pressing that post button.
Yes, no.
Oh, okay.
No, it's not. It's about, first and foremost, sitting down and deciding what the strategy is for the client. So finding out, who they want to be hearing, reading about them, and what is going to resonate with them, but going one step beyond just what's going to resonate with them, but what's going to make them sit up and pay attention, what's going to be thought-provoking. In effect, what we want to be doing is getting their target audience to send them an email or pick up the phone, or to further that conversation. So it's obviously it's about creating awareness, but it's very much about also creating a reaction, a positive reaction, or a reaction where people think, my gosh, this is a situation that's going to impact on me at some point. I need to talk to these guys about, how I can solve it or how I can make the most of it. So that's the initial strategy. It's looking at who we want to target, what they read, what they're listening to, so how we can reach out to them, and then what the messages are that we want to reach out. And only then do we decide which platforms we're going to go with, and then obviously what stories. And because I'm dealing with the media, So although I'll work with their social media as well, the key idea is getting the thought leadership pieces over there. It's then about crafting the idea of a story and sending it out to the journalists who are relevant. So looking at what they're working on and thinking, right, okay, my story would be something I believe that could be of interest to them, sending it to them. But not as a press release, sending it to them as an abstract, so a snippet of what the idea is, proposing that article, and then following that through. And I've had a great success rate with that because it's very tailored to them. So it's all about quality rather than quantity, in the sense of really pinpointing which journalists I think it would be relevant to and would be the most impactful for my client, as it were. So it is, there's a whole bunch of strategy that happens behind it. And with editorial, you can go very broad. So a client, say, who's in, say in change management, for instance, they will deal with specific sectors themselves. Change management goes right across the board. So if they're dealing with, say, companies in the automotive sector, in the insurance sector, in the finance sector, each one of those is a vertical that has a whole bunch of media that would be relevant to them. So we're not just talking about the business of change management. We're also talking about specific case studies in, say, the pharmaceutical sector or the automotive or whatever. So it's about really trying to get as close as possible to the target audience with stories that will make them want to get in touch, will be of interest to them, that will have some sort of impact.
There's one thing, and you mentioned it 2 or 3 times there, that I think a lot of people forget, and that's that call to action. Get in touch. And if you haven't got somebody that knows what they're doing, it's really easy to create a whole host of content with no call to action.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, and then it's very demoralizing as well. You kind of feel that you're just shouting out into the void and nobody's listening.
Yeah.
So it is about a call to action very much. And it is about, it's very interesting. I've had a number of different clients over the years. The greatest thing that happens is when they say, my gosh, I won that account because of what they read, my article that was in The Guardian, say that was a real life one. They won their account. They were pitching up against a number of different ones, and they said, we loved your opinion around, it was around a third sector event. And then others who will say, oh, I was at a networking and somebody said, oh, I read your article in Management Today. And then the next one is when people do actually phone up or send a LinkedIn and want to connect, because they said, I liked what you were saying about X, let's connect and let's get the conversation going. So I've always said it's not about getting your name in neon lights so that your grandmother is proud of you. It really has to have a reason. And some organizations are much more complex. Their story is much more complex. What they want to get across is multifaceted and complex. So it's perfect for a thought leadership piece because you can really deconstruct it and explain it and demonstrate and highlight the benefits that it has within the context of what they do. So and that's what I like doing is sort of teasing out the core of the story, as it were.
Where do you think people are going wrong when they're Where do you think people are going wrong when they're structuring their comms strategy, when they're doing it or trying to do it themselves?
I think it's less what they're doing wrong. It's more about what opportunities they're missing. So there is a tendency, a few years back, there was all this thing about, guerrilla marketing, just throw out as much messages as you can, just throw it out and just hope to God something will stick. And I've never liked doing that. So that's one of the reasons I don't advocate sending out press releases, because one of the things is that's going to tell every journalist that, pretty much all their colleagues have also received exactly the same message. So it's about tailoring rather than going out, in a big bang. It's about showing that you've read the publication that you're targeting your story to, so that it is really relevant to them, because ultimately it's your name, your brand on the line. And if I'm sure we all have this, that you see something that repetitively comes back onto your emails and you think, oh my gosh, they're always trying to sell me, I don't know, socks or whatever I don't want. You just cut them out immediately. It goes into your trash. Whereas if it's somebody who does offer you, or looks like they're offering you content or something that could be valuable, it's not all the time. You can't always hit it right. But at least, there's that connection, then you're much more likely to get their attention. So it's about tailoring very much. And it's not about just sending a whole bunch of messages out and hoping something will stick. It's very much about thinking, well, I'd rather get 3 pieces, one in the Times, one in the FT, and say one in Management Today, than getting into Pig Breeders Monthly or whatever it is and things. It's not relevant, but it was an easy squeeze, so it was easy to get into. So, and then the other thing is that your content should be, your writing should be good, and your content should be interesting, and that can be challenging. So I love writing, but I'm always challenged because I have to always obviously mirror what my client's tone is and what they're trying to say, but also, put certain editorial rules around that as well. So if you like writing, it's much better, obviously, but you have to be sure that it's good, it's quality, and what you're saying is backed up with facts and is interesting.
One thing I think you mentioned previously was this notion of thought leadership. How important do you think thought leadership is, and does it change from industry to industry, from the industries that you actually work within?
It's very important. I think it's very important. So I think content is very important, and for me, opinions and thought leadership pieces. So in a way, they came about for me many years ago when I was still very much in the early days of working on B2B. And I had a client who was in the packaging design sector, and we could never, ever, ever mention any of their clients. We could never mention that they'd done the packaging for, crisps or Twiglets or whatever. They couldn't mention anything because they always had to sign a deal that they would never say that. So I was faced with the fact that that to me, as a young PR, was kind of the key thing we'd be talking about, obviously, was that they had changed, this pack to look like this. So what I worked with then was, okay, so what were their learnings from working with that specific industry sector? And these became effectively, I guess, thought leadership pieces because they were their learnings. They didn't reveal the name of the organization, but they talked about their learnings. And as I worked through that, I realized that actually that was more valuable as information than saying, oh, by the way, they added a little bit more yellow here and a bit of blue there, and the pack's a little bit bigger. And it was quite an eye opener. And so now when I go and I pitch with clients and I'm chatting to them, sometimes they'll say, oh, there are no case studies. We can't mention any client names, any brand names. And that's okay. We'll focus very much on thought leadership because ultimately that's going to give us a platform to demonstrate what you would do best. And if we can talk about certain industry sectors and if we can draw an insight, it's perfect. But if we can't mention client names, it's not the end of the world.
One thing that highlights for me is that there's no excuse not to be creating content in any way, shape, or form. There's always a way. There's always something you can be talking about.
Yes, very much so. Very much. But I think what happens often with clients or organizations who bring on board a PR, say, is because they're so focused in their day-to-day workings that they actually don't see that bigger picture or the woods for the trees, as it were. They kind of, because they're so in the middle of it. So it takes somebody from the outside to say, well, look, this could be of interest. We'll pull this out and we'll make something of it that can be very helpful.
Would you say there's a difference between thought leadership and an influencer?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes, most definitely. I mean, in the sense, we're aiming to influence with our thought leadership pieces, but thought leadership pieces are much more long form. There's a lot more content to them. Whereas influencers, as I see them, are much more. First of all, they often use much more visual medium rather than long form content. So it's a much shorter, snappier, impactful message that they'll get across. So a very short video, images, or just a few, what they're doing or whatever. So they're people who we want to follow because we want to see what they're doing, how they're doing it, who with, or whatever. Whereas thought leadership is much more, it's much more thoughtful. It's much more in depth. So I think influencers are fantastic for certain brands. They're great because it is that, this person, is eating that type of spaghetti, whatever. It must be fantastic. And influencers have been going on since forever. They've been, but now, of course, they have these phenomenal platforms, which are the social media platforms. Back in the day, it was maybe some famous footballer or whatever's face on a box of biscuits, say, that would be the influencer in inverted commas. Now, of course, they have this amazing capacity to reach millions of people. And now with influencers, they're even talking about, there are virtual influencers as well that are coming to the fore as well. So avatars as well. So that's a whole different sort of sphere. And in my mind, it really works very well for younger brands and for young people. They're very into that sort of, who's doing what, who's wearing what. And so thought leadership is what we do when we talk about the influencers, you see, in a big article.
It's going to be really interesting in say 5-10 years when the people that have almost been brought up on instant influencers, so the likes of what's on Instagram and everything, are of a certain age where you'd expect them to be more looking for thought leaders than influencers. And that change in dynamic will be massively interesting.
It will be very interesting. It's amazing, isn't it? Because I've seen a couple of instances. One very recently, I think it's Royal Caribbean. They've been advertising. They're asking the general public to send in their favorite Instagram travel story. And what they're doing is they're picking an Instagrammer, somebody who's going to travel with them for 3 weeks on the boat. They're paying, I think, £2,000 a week to travel with them and just write up, send stories, do images, post images on Instagram. That's just so niche. And Iceland did the same thing. They wanted somebody to be in the country for a year to just post on social media about Iceland. And they just put it out to anybody. Just send us in your favorite Instagram travel story, and we'll pick the best one we think would be relevant to us. You think, wow, fantastic. And so in years to come, that is what's going to happen. But I hope that will work well with the more long form content too, because everybody still wants information. So there's that quick thrill of getting a quick bit of information, and then there is deep diving into more information to get a bit more meat out of it, if you like. I think the two work very well together.
Do you think the type of content that is utilised makes a difference? So your video, copy, image, audio?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, no, yeah, very much so. And I mean, video is coming very much to the fore now. And then everybody's debating the right length of the video that you should have, because again, it goes back to the thing that society is all about. Everything should be very fast and speedy. So you have to get your message over as fast as you possibly can, or you lose your audience. They disappear. But interestingly enough, looking at the pop-up videos that appear, when I'm watching something on YouTube, say, you realize that what happens, and I think it's fantastic, is that ability now, the clever ones, to really hone down their message, to crystallize it to absolute perfection within those first 3 minutes. Because otherwise they've lost you. You think, I don't want to watch this. I don't want to watch what I'm watching. But several times I've been caught up. I thought, well, actually, let's go and let's see what it is. And it can be very valuable information. So it's, again, about capturing people right at the beginning, visually with the video, and then you'll watch, and then, then they can send you an article. They do all sorts of things. So video, I think, is very, very strong. Podcasts are very strong too, because again,
I'm
it
glad you
goes
said
back to
that.
that thing, Yes, of course. No, but it is because it's so much easier, isn't it, to just sit there on your train or in the car or whatever and just listen to it. You don't have to read it. So of course it is. So that form is fantastic as well. And I mean, maybe it's my generation, but I love reading and I love writing. So I will always read. My kids don't particularly like reading. So there you go. So in 5-10 years' time, where will that be? I don't know. We might have to stuff all my thought leadership pieces into videos. What can I tell you?
That might take a while.
It might, yes.
Nothing beats face-to-face interaction. I don't think it ever will. But the way certain comms channels have evolved and changed and we consume them now, surely that must mean media relations, as we more traditionally know them, are far less important.
So by that, do you mean my relationship with different journalists?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, I've always said whenever, and I've been, as I've said, I've worked in a number of different sectors with PR, and so there's been many a time when I've been faced with the challenge of finding the right publications and then the right journalists, and so sometimes a client will say to me, but if you don't have contacts in that specific area, and I'll say, well, I think you've got, if I do think you've got good stories to talk about. So just because I don't have a contact doesn't mean to say that I can't sell in the story, because it's all about the story. So, and that's always happened. If you can find a good story and it's well put together, then you will find a journalist that it's relevant for and who'll use it. And so, but it goes back to saying about sending them something that's tailored to them. So you do develop a relationship then with those journalists, because they appreciate that you stick to the deadline, that you give them quality content and so on. And then what happens is, of course, a lot of these move around between different industry sectors and different media themselves. So there is, part of it is good relationships, definitely, especially with freelance journalists who work for the national media, because that, of course, they get inundated with ideas being put to them. So if you can stand out from the crowd because you've worked with them before, then that does help, definitely. But I would never say, I always say to everybody has to start somewhere. So don't think, oh my gosh, I have no media contacts, therefore I can't do it, because everybody has to start somewhere. The key thing is to offer them something that you believe would be relevant to them. And then if you send it to them and you don't hear back, then phone them up. And just say, look, I know you're inundated with emails, so I'm just following up on this because I really think it could be relevant to you, and because that's the truth. So it's about being honest and really doing the job properly.
Sure, and building those relationships. It will always be about building relationships, regardless.
That will never go away. Yes, definitely.
So at this point, I like to try and get a segue into the quickfire questions, and I keep saying this on the podcast, and I shouldn't really, but my segue is, okay, Janine, you're going to get no help with these, so you can't contact anybody, and there's no face-to-face interaction here. You're on your own. Are you ready for this?
Yeah, go on.
It was a great segue. Come on.
It was fantastic.
Thank you.
It was. Go for it.
Name one must-read business book.
Okay, so I really rate Seth Godin, and I'm currently reading, I think it's quite a new book by him called Purple Cow, which I think is really great. I think Seth is always got invaluable content. So Purple Cow, that's my book.
I've just finished reading This Is Marketing. That's his newest book, and I'm going to go back and start reading all the others.
Okay.
So that's cool.
Yeah,
so I can't wait.
Yeah, no, very good.
What was the last thing you Googled?
Oh, well, okay. How to make a yeast starter, because we're making pizza dough and we're making our own yeast starter. So that's got nothing to do with marketing at all.
No, it doesn't have to. We've had some bizarre ones, and you've made me really hungry now. So let's get through these quickly.
Okay.
What is your most used app at the moment?
Oh, a weather app. Yes.
What is your favorite theory, concept, or methodology?
Okay. So I've got many.
Okay.
depending on the occasion. I guess my favorite one is Eat the Frog. It's one of my all-time favorites. So, if you've got a list of things to do, always start with the one that's the most difficult and the one that you least want to do. And so that's the basis of Eat the Frog. You know about Eat the Frog, don't you? You know about eating the frog?
We covered it in I think episode 2. Somebody else mentioned that, yeah.
Well, there you are. There's a lot of frog eating. But exactly. And they say if you've got several frogs to choose from, then eat the ugliest first. In other words, always your worst thing on your to-do list, and then after that, everything else seems fine.
Absolutely, I love the fact that you've got a few favourites dependent on the mood and the situation. That's brilliant. I love that.
Yeah. Yes.
Final quickfire question: what would be your one tip for people who are studying at the moment?
Oh, okay. So I would say, well, enjoy it. Don't see it as a chore. Really do enjoy it. Climb into the experience, and above all, focus.
Janine, before you go, please can you tell us where people can find out more about yourself or get in touch with Armadillo Consulting Group?
Okay. Yes. So the website is armadillocg.com. So Armadillo Consulting Group, armadillocg.com. And I'm Janine at armadillocg.com.
Janine, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Thank you so, so much.
A pleasure. It's been lovely talking to you too, Peter. And I look forward to listening to this.
We've got just enough time to talk about the top takeaways from that fantastic chat with Janine before we discuss a bit more detail influencers. Now, creating content that matters, needs to have some form of structure. The main points Janine raised for doing this through thought leadership are: consider what the overall strategy is. Then also think about who your target market is and who do you want to be reading what you're writing. Think about what will resonate within this market and make it thought-provoking. And all of this is done before you consider where this content needs to be placed, i.e. the different channels of comms. But don't forget about the CTA, call to action, as so many people can miss that part. And finally, remember, it's always quality over quantity. Rather than focus on what people are doing wrong, Janine suggests it's more about the opportunities that are being missed. Creating a standard press release and then sending it out to the wider world is not good enough nowadays. You need to be selective in your approach and tailor your content accordingly. Remember, it's your name, your brand, and your reputation. So make sure your content is as interesting as you are. And finally, thought leadership is very different from being an influencer, although they're both looking to do a very similar thing. Influencers are more visual and impactful, whereas thought leaders need to be going in depth with their content. Either way, it is what will fit with the brand that can be the deciding factor as to what the final content will look like. And we're going to talk about influencers in a little bit. So I'll see you on the other side of these bubbles. Right then, influencers. As we've been speaking about this today, I thought it'd be a good idea to dig a little deeper into this type of marketing. Now, influencer marketing isn't anything new. It's been around since the famous were seen as famous. But what has heightened the knowledge of this tactic is the accessibility to communicate to hundreds and thousands of people with very little investment, mainly through the platforms such as Instagram and Snapchat. So what is influencer marketing? Well, it's leveraging the popularity of an individual to promote a certain product or service to a desired set of people, probably their followers. The important factor to consider here is the relevance of any individual and the impact they have in a particular market. Both the influencer and the thing, the product, the service, the software, the system that they are promoting must be aligned and have similar principles in order for them to resonate within the market an organisation wants to promote to and persuade them to take some sort of action, usually a transaction. If you're still unclear about what all this is, take a look on Instagram at a personal trainer called James Smith. Hi, James, if you're listening. Avid listener, I'm sure. Although he doesn't endorse much himself, only the brands he has close ties to and believes in, he does shine a light on the fitness industry and how some celebrities are endorsing products they A, shouldn't be, and B, offer false promises to those people they're trying to influence who probably have very limited knowledge about that particular fitness product or how it's supposed to work. Check him out and you'll soon see what I mean. As always, the link is in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today on Marketing Study Lab. It really means the world that you're listening to this out there. And hopefully I've provided you some value. If you're looking to know more about what Marketing Study Lab does and is about, go to marketingstudylab.co.uk or get in touch with me personally, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or feel free to email me at peter@marketingstudylab.co.uk. Happy marketing.